Have you been curious about getting a spiritual name or medicine name? Well, then this video is for you. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name's Fola, and here on Deep Mind Squared, we talk all things magical practices and altered states. In this video today, I wanted to touch on a topic that might upset some people, but I think it's really important to have a conversation about. And that's around this idea of spiritual names or medicine names. And the reason I wanted to have this conversation is it's kind of showing up in my reality recently where people are talking about receiving spiritual names and using those names for a variety of reasons. And I guess for myself, having kind of come from this sort of like mixed background where language and culture can be a bit of a funny thing, I think it's super important that we understand what we are bringing into our life and how we're utilizing different cultures or languages and ideas in our own, especially if it's not part of our original culture, the culture in which we've been born or raised into. It's really important that we check kind of like the privilege of where we come from. And so this video, I hope, will kind of highlight some of the benefits, some of the difficulties of using spiritual names, and maybe why people might use them. And I want to share a bit about my own experience within this world of spiritual names and medicine names, as I like to call them. Before we get into all that, I invite you to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you're updated on future video releases. And I like to share all sorts of things about magic and psychedelics, altered states, all that fun stuff. So make sure you keep up to date with what we have going on the channel here. So what exactly is a spiritual name? Some people might call it a medicine name, a magical name. Kind of depends, I guess, on the belief system that you follow. Within magic, a lot of people will have a name that they use solely for ritual and ceremony. And a lot of different indigenous cultures and cultures across the world do the same thing. I guess that's where we kind of get this concept of a spiritual name, a medicine name, or some type of magical name. It is a way for us to relate to spirit and to kind of have this personal relationship and a bit of secrecy, dare I say, when it comes to performing ritual. And it helps us to really dive into that unknown space and ensure that other people can't really interfere with the work that's being done. So oftentimes, even in magical communities and spaces, people use names or pseudonyms that aren't their real full name. And this is a way of protection. So this is kind of one reason why people might use some type of name. Also, in some groups that I've been a part in, whether they're kind of more in the shamanic lens versus the magical occult lens, the different medicine names or spiritual names are names that, you would never tell anyone else, or ones that you might actually share in a community setting. So within some of the different communities that I'm a part of, I do have a few different names that I've been given through various kind of sacred ceremony, and I will use them specifically for certain reasons. And some I do openly discuss, and others it's only meant for me, between myself, spirit, and whoever maybe gave the name to me. But ideally, this use of the name is to really connect us to our path. Some people, they find a culture or a belief system and they really are absorbed into it. It's it's just a part of them. I see this happen with many people within yoga communities, different types of indigenous or African sort of based traditions, and it becomes them. And they embody the name. The name is given to them. It was them from the beginning. The name that they were given at birth wasn't really who they are. And there's this essence that comes with that person. And I think in those cases, completely, they have become that name. And they really walk their path in a way that is in alignment with that culture and acknowledging, the privileges that come with that, maybe being born in a certain other culture. I didn't have so much of the entitlement or authority or power to live life freely compared to others. And so this name can be utilized as a way to really identify with the new beliefs that they're taking on or kind of re-embodying, because I think it's most of those people, they've always been involved in that culture, maybe past lives and so forth, and they're reliving it now in a different form of a body. There's some power there. Oftentimes, what I'm seeing is there's many people who just get a name and they get a name and they walk around with the name as though it's like this token. And it's like they're not really living it. And I think that's what we need to all check in with ourselves. Are we living our truth? Are we living our name? What does that mean to us? And I think this is part of our human journey, our development, is to come to understandings about this and not to allow the ego to, be like, oh, I have this such and such name and that's great and that makes me a better person than you, or whatever the case might be. And I'm sure that happens. But it's us acknowledging that this is just a name. It's really nothing. Anything that we put on this pedestal is just the ego's perspective of it. And this is where I was kind of getting stuck on this, because for myself, I remember when I actually received my medicine name, and it was in this pipe ceremony. It was the beginning of kind of my journey, I guess you could say. And this was a part of this process. And when I was in this ceremony, I remember thinking what on earth is happening here? I had no idea really about any of the elements at this point. I had a lot of doubt. I was at this point really questioning the leader that was guiding us through this process. And I'm like, no, this cannot be real. This woman's a charlatan. All this stuff was coming through my mind. And then it was my turn, and I went up because I didn't leave. That part of me wanted to actually walk out of the room. And the first words that came out of her mouth just hit me, boom. And I knew in that moment, okay, there's some truth about this. And my name, the meaning behind my name, not just from what was being shared to me, but what I knew was being lived out in my life at the time. And no one else at that point in that group would have known this. That was what was a huge confirmation to me. And it just really it sank deep and showed the power that these names can hold if, brought about or brought into our life in a way that's really quite sacred. And I think to be able to utilize that and to see the power in having that name, I can see why people want to receive a spiritual name or to understand who they are. But I think, again, we have to be mindful we're not seeking, because otherwise it's let's get 10,000 different names in all these different cultural groups or spiritual beliefs and so forth. And that can just lead to more ego. That this experience was really quite beautiful for me. And I wanted to tie this into some of the challenges that, talking with other people that I know who I think have a pretty unbiased view, folks of a wide range of different cultural backgrounds, whether they're people of color, if they're white, Christian, non-Christian, whatever, different magical belief systems. There is this really fine line that we have to be mindful of they call it cultural appropriation, or coming into spaces where we, with certain privileges, meaning, myself being a mixed woman of color who's for the most part lived in Western world, speaks English fluently, entering that into a non-English speaking space and trying to take the culture of that. I even identify this with some of the work that I do with the Hermetic Kabbalah and that Jewish mysticism. It's I'm not Jewish. So how much of that culture, how much of that language dare I try to go in, interpret, understand, whatever, and acknowledge though that that's not my culture. There might be powers and experiences that I benefit from with that, but it is not mine. And there are a lot of harms that have happened to people within, Judaism, the Israeli people, that across time, that they have not been so fortunate to live a life so privileged or free in some ways, many ways, others maybe less, right? So it's really a personal experience we need to be aware of. And this cultural appropriation, these privileges that we can enter certain spiritual spaces or holistic spaces, we see different communities, we have to be checking that at all times. And this, concept that, say, for instance, me as an English speaker, I have an English name, and I go and I then take a different culture's name, different language, and start to embody that in this way that's oh, look, I can say this, but in certain areas of my life, I will use that other culture's name, and in other areas, I'm going to use my English name because it gets me further, or, people won't look at me so weird or whatever. This is just the reality of what's happened for many folks. And I'll share a bit of a personal story that for me, I've been doing healing on for, I guess, up until this point, even still. It seems like it comes. It's like an ancestral, intergenerational healing piece. And that's on my Nigerian side. My great-great-grandfather, Yoruba is our traditional language, our culture, our religion, up until that point. And he became quite involved with Christian missionaries that were in Nigeria at the time. And what happened was he changed the family or traditional Yoruba name from Ogunlolu to what is like a British basic English name. And I didn't realize this up until my young adulthood, early 20s, that something like this had happened. I just thought, oh, we always had this British name, so what? And it wasn't until I started my spiritual healing journey that I started getting these downloads, insights after different healing sessions where I could feel the shame, the guilt, a lot of the energy that my grandparents and different people along the family line faced and experienced because of this change of our name from what was a traditional Yoruba name and connected like Ogun, like the god, that is like a powerful, powerful deity. They changed it in order to fit in or whatever. I mean, I haven't talked directly with this relative because they've since passed, but these are the energies of that desire to fit in, to keep the family safe, to have a sense of belonging because it wasn't safe to belong with the Yoruba name. And even still, I'd love to change my name to this traditional name, but it's really not looked very positively on by other people in my family. It doesn't highlight well with the Christian views and so forth. So here I am in this kind of struggle that I think many people don't realize folks go through. And to me, that's not even a struggle because it's kind of like a non-issue. It's an internal thing. For many people, they don't really have that choice. They've been given a name. And they live in a society where people don't understand that name. They might be bullied or harassed or experience a lot of not so great things because of their name. And this adds to the challenges that many people face. So then to have someone show up and take basically, the same name even, depending on the language, and to use that name as a sense of power when they haven't had the lived experience of what it's like to be living with that name. That, I think, is where the issue is. So I hope this all makes sense. It makes sense in my head. I think it makes sense. And when I spoke with folks, me translating it onto screen might not always be the best thing. But there is something here I just hope to spread a bit of awareness about. And for us to really acknowledge, what are we doing? And how are we acknowledging people's experiences? Because I know for me, my full name, my Yoruba name, Fola, that's not even my full name. Apparently I don't even say my name correctly sometimes because I don't speak the language, which is a little unfortunate. But the things I have had happen or said to me because of my name, some that are, I think people have just a good meaning, and some that are not. They're just downright rude and racistly not appropriate. That's not a word, I know, but it should be. And there is this sense of wanting to just make spaces safe for folks. So how can we do that? How can we acknowledge that, we can still identify with certain belief systems and so forth, but check in with ourselves. What is our privilege? What is appropriate or not? And how can we still be us without over-identifying with these egoic kind of labels, or these labels, I guess, of how we need to show up or who we need to be so that we fit in, right? Because a lot of people don't get that privilege of having a choice to fit in certain ways. So just want to invite you to check with yourself in this. And if there's any comments, any ideas, feel free to share. I'd love to have a conversation. This is my perspective about this. I'm totally open to hearing others because I feel like that's how we learn and grow, is to have just a respectful conversation about these sorts of topics that many people, I think, don't want to really say anything. And I know for me, I didn't really know, should I speak about this? Like, I had to have conversations with other people outside of certain groups so that I could get a bit of like an understanding of what was like activating me, what was coming up, and how I felt about this topic, as with many other topics. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and feel free to check out some of the other videos on the channel. And I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Take care.